Good morning to all those joining us today. We have quite a crew here today, so we've switched the way that we are showing. So people should just pop up as the main window when they are speaking. So, who has an idea of where they want to go today? I think Paige wanted to go in the direction of talking about vaccinations, right, Paige?
Yes, I thought about that this week because I took my son to a clinic and I hadn't been to the doctor in a while. I homeschool my kids, and on the wall it was saying, "Remember to get this vaccine before you go back to school." And so it brought to my mind that might be something that we would need to talk about for the community because I don't have been out from with homeschooling my kids. I haven't been completely up to date on all of my kids' vaccines. And, I have mixed views on this. I could see lots of people's concerns, and I just wouldn't want to cause anybody a concern. And so that's why I thought about the vaccines because that's a thing that we would might need to cover
Right.
for being in a community together.
It's a very good topic, actually, I think. So let's see who's here to talk to us today. And, good morning to whoever's there. Good afternoon now to whoever's there. It's afternoon. Um, who would like to talk to us about vaccines or anything really? We can get to it later if you have something on your mind. Please take to the heart of this matter, because the heart of this matter is not whether you vaccinate your child or not. The heart of the matter is what it means to you to vaccinate your child. And so you need to stop and think about it. For example, Paige, if you are trusting upon being in a community where everybody is in contact with everybody else and you're concerned about one of your children getting ill, how would your child become ill?
In contact with other folks, of course.
Right. So there would have to be some kind of viral infection or something that they were picking up from somebody else in the community, right?
Right,
Unless they went outside the community, right?
right,
And unless they picked up the virus from transmission from an animal or something in a cross species event, right?
right.
So we should think about these things very carefully. This is Thomas, actually, here to talk about this. And the underlying issue with vaccinations is how do these viruses get going to begin with? So let's go back to the smallpox vaccination, okay? The smallpox had been around for a long time. In my lifetime as Thomas Jefferson, I had my family vaccinated with cowpox in order to inoculate them against what was considered a very, very, very dread disease in that day. And they survived through the milder form of disease that the cowpox created and were inoculated against smallpox because the viruses were similar enough that the immunity to one provided an immunity to the other. So in my day, it was a way to protect your family. And then when the smallpox vaccine came out in the 20th century and all the children got vaccinated, smallpox no longer was a big concern for the community, right? However, diseases like polio and smallpox did a number on members of the human race. And so everything that you do leaves a trace of energy behind it, you might say. And everything you do affects everybody else. So, for example, smallpox used to cull the population, you might say. It used to reduce the ones who were prone to infection in numbers, you see, and the healthiest members would survive through the crises and the epidemics. Now, why do you think that was? That some would not either get smallpox or they would get a milder case of it if nobody was inoculated against it. Why do you think some survived and some didn't? Anyone? Paige, go ahead if you want to.
Um, as far as vaccines, what I understand is you get a little dose of the virus so that you can handle it better.
Right. So that you
And
get an immunity, you get build up the antibodies. But what about before inoculation was available? Was a thing. Why would some get why when a disease comes through, do some get it and some don't?
well, from what we're learning about the spiritual part, sometimes it's helping us clear out some things that are deeper within our soul. I
Exactly. It is a very complex interrelationship between individuals and their connection with God energy. Because in the example that was provided earlier before we began this session, you gave to the community an article that had to do with an autistic child that may have contacted or been had their autism activated by a vaccine. And the article indicated that the parents were able to sue and obtain a judgment of $1.5 million, correct?
yeah, that was in the article. Yeah.
And we don't know why that happened, do we?
No.
We don't know why a lot of children could be given this vaccine, and occasionally someone who was given the vaccine also developed or had autism, right?
Right.
Do you know the connection between the two? Do you know that the vaccine caused the autism?
I personally don't know just because I'm not, knowing a lot about the scientific parts of it either. So,
Well, this is a part of a much bigger picture. And as Steph suggested, we don't know the whole story. We don't know that the parents didn't ask God to give them $1 million and that God didn't say, sure, I'll give you $1 million. I'll give you a child with autism and you can sue and get $1 million. We don't know the whole story. There's an old maxim, be careful what you wish for, right? Would you rather have autism and $1 million or no autism and have to continue grubbing for a living at whatever minimum wage you might have? Which would you rather have?
well, far as autism goes, it's a journey my son is going through. So I'm not even sure about, it's what I'd rather have is something from his story. So I
Okay.
see that point of view too, that that's something that I might not be able to control on a soul level because it might have been something that he needed to go through based on his past histories or a life contract. I don't know the answers on that.
Okay, so you are understanding the complexity of it. It's not just the journey of the parents, it's the journey of the child as well.
Right.
So you don't know that the parents didn't say to God, or one of them, if I just had $1 million, if I just had $1 million, can you give me $1 million? And there was a child in heaven, or a soul in heaven, we should say, who said, hey, I'll play that game. I'll play that game because I want to know what it's like to be autistic. I want to have that point of view. So, the point I'm trying to make to you is the factors involved here are so complicated that you're not going to actually know what actually causes the thing and that thing. You just won't.
Right. That
And
I
if you
agree
think
with.
you do, you write God out of the formula. Because God hears everything you say and he says, well, if that's what you want, let me give you that point of view. If that's what you want, let's do it that way. And so, for the parents who sue because the child got autism and they had a vaccination and they're trying to prove that the vaccination caused the autism, they will look for all the factors in their favor, right?
Right.
They will seek out all the evidence to prove that they are right and that the drug company is at fault and they need to compensate for the damage that the vaccination did. And it didn't say, or at least I didn't pick up what vaccination it was. However, let's say that the vaccine or smallpox were to be alleged to be the cause of autism or some other effect that caused damage to a particular child that grew up maybe to be an adult or was still a child. And the individual who's so afflicted, or the parents, or the attorney, or whatever, sought to pin the responsibility on the smallpox vaccination. So now measure that against all the children who didn't get smallpox because of the vaccination. So, can you see the problem in trying to sort this all out?
Right.
I'll stop now and let others chime in with their thoughts on this.
I think for many of us in our families, I don't know if we'll get into the COVID situation, and I don't know if we have to be careful of even saying that word on YouTube. I know there's a lot of, they don't like to hear that in videos, so I don't know. But I think there's a bigger picture to that I'd like to understand, but I don't want to take it that direction if it's not ready to go there yet. I really see what Thomas is saying about these things that have really hurt mankind. As far as what happened with COVID, I think there's other situations, but there again, we need to hear
Go
from
ahead
him.
with your question, Jim, about COVID. We're not worried about whether they will say, hey, you spent too much time thinking about this rationally, and so we have to can your video because we can't have a rational discussion on COVID. Go ahead.
The thing that bothered me was, and it goes back to the bigger picture where I'm trying to understand heaven's side, because we in this generation get so caught up in politics and conspiracy and all of that. And so in this group, we're being taught how to step away from that and listen to one another and get God's heart in it. The question that I have was the source of this disease and the way it was handled through our government, and not being able to have a choice about it. whether to take the vaccination or not. And
Stop right there because we're going to take one question at a time, one thing at a time. First, your statement, our government, you are the government. So let's get that clear. Second, you didn't have a choice. Give me an example when you did not have a choice whether or not to have a vaccination or not. Did someone hold you down and give it to you?
not me personally, but members of my family uh, had to either accept it or lose their job.
Stop there, because that's a common one that came up. So they had a choice. They could take the vaccination and keep their job, or they could deny the vaccination and lose their job. So there was a choice, right?
Yes,
Tortured and told that you have to relinquish your religion and accept the religion of the one that is torturing you. Do you have a choice?
yes.
You always have a choice, dear. However, there is a tendency to want to relinquish your sovereignty by saying, well, they forced me, they forced me, they forced me to do this. Those people could have refused the vaccination and they didn't keep their job. That's okay. Our government in the USA is run in a certain way. And perhaps some people would get upset about it and they would say, we don't like the way you did that when you passed a certain law that said, or a requirement that said, in order to hold a certain job that we can control, because they couldn't control private employers. The government did not have the right to say to a private employer, you have to force your employees to take the vaccination, right?
I don't know that for a fact personally. There was tremendous pressure from the government to businesses, and a lot of businesses acquiesced to that
A
pressure.
lot of pressure today not to talk about this.
Yeah.
And we here are making a choice to talk about it, right? It's all about choice. It's all about sovereignty. It's all about being an eternal soul. If you're an eternal soul, you cannot be harmed by smallpox, a vaccination, losing your job, or being tortured. Because the soul cannot be harmed. What can be harmed, though?
Just the
Say
body.
again, the body. So, which are you? Are you a soul or a body?
Both, but I feel we need to let our soul dominate who we are, because
Okay, so Jim, if you don't like the fact that your family members had to take the vaccination or lose their job, what could you have done? What choices did you have?
I tried to help them get as much scientific information, medical information as possible and help them. But ultimately, it was their decision. One child felt that they had to do it to be able to be teaching children, and they love to do that. Another one said, I don't want to take it, and moved out of the state. So, but we just tried to assist them in them making the decision because it is their sovereignty. I agree.
It was their right to make a decision, and so the one who said, well, I had to take it, was sort of passing the buck. All she had to say is, I love teaching these children. I'm going to take a risk with the vaccination because I care about teaching the children more than anything else. I could get killed on my way to work today in a traffic accident, but I'm going to take the risk because I like my job and I like being here to teach children, right?
Right. And she did. Yeah.
And so it's a choice. So let's not minimize the value of making choices by saying you had to do it. You don't have to do anything. Death is always an option to go to heaven, you see, and experience God energy. And that's a very important point I'm making here because there's a lot of people who are going to be trying to find someone to blame for what's coming to the earth today and say, well, I had to do that. I had to do that. I had to do that. No, you didn't. You get a choice. If you want to stay where you are and the house is burning down, you have a choice. When you smell the smoke, you either get up and move or you say, it'll probably go away, right? So now think about all the people that got to go home because of COVID. So, how did that affect people? Well, it affected different people in different ways. Maybe the family said, oh my God, they died, and therefore that's the end of them. Blip, they're done. And some said, well, they get to go to heaven. The poor grandma who was in the rest home and didn't even know where she was got to go home finally, thank God. And some would say, well, I lost my job because so many patients died during COVID. I took my vaccination, but I still lost my job because they didn't have any need for me anymore because the rest home where I worked was devastated by COVID, you see. And some might say, well, the way we see it is that all those people wanted to go home and they asked God to give them a way home, and God did. And so who wins? Who wins this battle of who's right and who's wrong?
I think ultimately the soul receives what they want and makes the choice and they receive that. And I think what we're learning in this group is to not blame and to know that we do have a choice. And we know our forefathers, Thomas Jefferson and everyone, many of them made the ultimate sacrifice to, and how apropos on this weekend of Memorial Day, made the ultimate sacrifice based on what their decision was. And we honor that and appreciate that. And we'll have to do the same.
That is correct. What do you think of the guy that throws himself on the grenade to save his platoon?
So honorable.
So every time that you have to make a decision, you have to measure it by your own standards, right? And so some might say, well, I'll take this vaccination today, even though I don't know what effect it might have on me, because I trust on being a good member of the community and making sure that I don't take any risks of transmitting a disease to somebody else who might die of it. Maybe I'll throw myself on the grenade. What do you think of that?
May I add something? My thought is, she was it. First of all, as a nurse in the medical, I did not feel that it was a true vaccination as the previous ones had been. There was other stuff involved with it. So for that reason alone, made me very skeptical and fearful of it. But let me see, there was a different point I wanted to bring up.
I don't think you were fearful of it. You just didn't feel like it was the best.
Something I wanted to put in my body. And that it was more important for me to take care of my body to try to keep my resistance up as much as possible so that I don't get it to pass it on, vice versa.
So you see, everybody looks at it through their own peepers. And you tried to get as much information as you could to make an informed decision, right? But ultimately, it was your decision. It was Jesus's decision when he was standing there and they said, "Well, are you the king of the Jews?" To say, "Spare me, don't crucify me," right? What I'm saying here is everybody has a different point of view because of their history. Steph, do you want to tell your story about it? Yes, I will. So I'm not anti-vaccination by any means. However, I say everybody just makes their own decision based on what they want to do, and then they take the consequences. Because whatever you do, you have to accept the consequences, right? So when I was a young mother and I was still in law school, there was what was it? The one of the flus was around, pig flu or something. It was a long time ago in the 70s. And I had a baby that was very small and a toddler. And my husband had to go away for a few days, and it was the end of the semester. I think it was second semester or whatever. Maybe it was third semester. It was right before Christmas, and took my final of the semester. And I said I had avoided taking the vaccination. I said, well, maybe I'll just take it because I do have little kids and I want to protect them. Because normally I'm not too worried about flus and stuff. I do have all the ones that we took back in the 50s, smallpox, DPT, whatever, and have the scars to prove it. But anyway, I went and got the shot. And I went home and a few hours later, I started feeling very sick. And could only lay on the couch. I had no one to take care of the kids, so I had to try to, do the best I could with these babies. Well, I'm laying on the couch feeling so sick, and the TV's on, and I'm watching the TV, and I'm not kidding. This very day on comes an article that says they are suspending the administration of this flu vaccine because they've discovered that more people are dying of the vaccine than are dying of the disease. And I said, oh boy. I did recover from it. However, it left an impression on me. So when it came time to take the COVID vaccine, I said no. However, I did not have to take. I worked for the government actually because I would go around doing census. It was during the census time, the federal census. And so we were required to wear a mask, and that didn't bother me. I was happy to wear a mask and to wear a mask to go public places, but I did not have to work with people like a nurse or some secretarial job where I were constantly around people and stuff. But I did, we weren't even expected to go past the door when we talked to people. And so I didn't take the vaccine. And I said, well, if I die, I die. But I was already retired. I was already older. And so those were my circumstances. And I took responsibility for whatever would happen as a result of it. But I also was cognizant of not creating a situation that might be dangerous to my family or anyone else. And that was how I handled it. However, you are defining who you are by the choices you make. If you're the man that has said, hey, we're going to crucify you for being the king of the Jews, and you say, no, no, please, I relinquish anything, I will do whatever you want, then that's how you define yourself, right? So all of these things like vaccinations are issues that allow people to define themselves to get a different point of view. There's no right or wrong, is there?
No.
It's just what you choose for your path. And then you take the consequences of it. But if you blame people and say they made me do this, they made me take that flu shot, and then those Christians out there, I talk to you especially. If you think that Jesus is your role model, and you're saying all those people are forcing me to take this vaccine, da 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 da, all these conspiracies, you're not following Jesus's footsteps. Jesus took responsibility for his choices, and he didn't blame others. Do you get this? Okay, that's my little rant. Anybody have anything else to say?
Well, I have been inspired to share my personal story after hearing this. Um, in March, well, in April, I was invited to a party, a celebration that was very important to the people who were inviting me. It was going to be very big, and I'm really not one for big parties. So I was thinking of how to get myself out of going without hurting them. And a thought came to me, I was just going to tell them I wasn't well, wasn't feeling well. This was in March. And a few days later, metaphorically, I was hit in the head with something big. I ended up in the hospital. So laying there in the hospital bed, I was laughing. I said, well, now I'm going to I'm going to tell them I'm really not feeling well. But I didn't tell them because I didn't want to mess up their party. Um, I mean, to share with the group, I had a stroke. And yeah, I was laughing and I was telling God that it wasn't funny, you know. I didn't want that type of hit on my head. And anyway, when I got home, I had to work on myself, and of course, had a conversation with God through Stephanie, and I'm getting better now. The speech is still affected, but I'm getting better now. But now I told myself I better be careful what I ask for, you know, because that was really huge for me. Yep.
Thank you for sharing that story, Winnie. It's a good one. It's a very good one. And although it's a hard one, it's like this saying, you know, that God's going to knock you on the head, and he'll keep knocking you on the head till you get the message. Just live day to day and make choices, and don't, you know, from your heart, right? Anybody else have thoughts on Winnie's story or anything that we've talked about so far, or questions about it?
I had a result of the whole vaccinate, don't vaccinate, and the division that it put with everybody. I'm in a like a tree tribe. We all get together and we have a main older man who used to be a professor, and so he knows all about trees. So we identify trees when we go on these hikes, and it's very fun. And I was a part of the original core group that kind of it sort of evolved around. And then we invited some other people. You meet different people, and it was always fun. And you know, like-minded souls getting together, like here. And then COVID hit, and then we didn't get together for a while because of social interaction and all that. And then we were trying, and the one time we went over to someone's house, we walked around his property, and then he went to invite us in, and then people said, oh, is everybody comfortable like coming inside? Because we were outside, we all felt safer, we were wearing masks and whatever. And somebody said, oh, well, as long as you're vaccinated. And I wasn't going to go in because I wasn't. And so I said, well, I'm not. And she spun around and looked at me, and I said, I'll just leave. And she's like, well, and she felt bad, but she was in fear. And she said, well, as long as you keep your mask on. And I'm thinking, there's going to be talking and eating, and we're going to be in the kitchen. I don't feel comfortable anymore. So I left. And then I kind of left the group for a good 9 months after that because I didn't feel all that welcome. And it was weird to feel that ostracized from a group that I was a part of because of a vaccine.
So let's break this down a little bit. So when you showed up for this party and there was a host at this party, the one that talked to you was the host or hostess?
Yeah, it was one of the guys' houses, and but our lead guy, our lead the professor. He sort of leads the group, but it was somebody else's house. And I don't even remember who said, as long as, you're vaccinated. Well, another girl said it. And it was the same girl that turned and looked at me when I said, I'm not.
So whoever had the house, it was her house. And she probably felt responsible for the people who were gathering there, right?
Sure. Yep.
And so she had the authority, the sovereignty to make a decision and say, this is what I'm going to say today. Without having to denigrate you or anything, she could have said, well, the choice I'm making is it would be against my best judgment for someone who's not vaccinated to come in. So I'll have to say that thank you for offering to leave. That might have been one way to handle it, right?
Mm-hmm.
How would you have felt if that had happened?
Had she said that, it might have been a little nicer. I mean, I could tell she felt bad, but she still was,
Well, what if
and it
she
wasn't
didn't
her
feel bad?
house. It was another person's house.
What if she didn't feel bad? What if she said, well, I have the right to make a decision, so I'm going to make a decision and a choice, and this is a choice I'm making, and I don't feel bad about it because I'm a sovereign being and I don't have to worry about what other people think. I just have to make a choice for what I feel in this circumstance is the thing that my heart tells me to do. How would you
Yeah,
feel
that's
then?
fine. And I did the same. I made the same choice, and that's why I stayed away from the group because I didn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But I wasn't going to get vaccinated just so I could make them feel comfortable and be back in the group.
Well, what if you took the issue of who's making who feel uncomfortable out of it? Because it's not your job to decide if they're uncomfortable or not. That's their point of view, right?
Yeah.
So then when she makes the choice, then it's like a game of tennis. The ball's in your court. You get to make a choice, right?
Yep.
And if we take all the blaming and shaming out of it, it's just a matter of a continual play by play approach to life, right?
Yes.
And if everybody takes responsibility for their own actions, then nobody is asked to be uncomfortable because they know where everybody stands, right?
Yes.
And there could be an employer that made a choice and said, I don't really care if you guys are vaccinated or not. It's not a problem for me because for whatever reason, this is the choice I'm making, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you lost your job and that's the choice you made and you don't blame anybody, it's just a choice you make and everybody goes, oh, okay, he made a choice or she made a choice. We respect that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you have to pay a fine for some reason, because the employer has to pay a fine because they make a certain choice and they say, okay, I'll pay the fine, but I have to make the choice that works for me according to my heart. So I'll make this choice. It's just a choice, right?
Yes.
Can you see how these issues can cease to be so emotionally charged when we just accept the fact that every one of us has the right to make a choice? And if every one of us was not accorded the right to make a choice, then none of us would feel like we had the right to make a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, your right to make a choice and to feel good about it and not feel uncomfortable or shame and blame depends upon me making a choice and saying to you, well, if I was in that situation, I would say, hey, I think I should get vaccinated today. Or you could have even said, well, I'm going to come in anyway. And that would be a choice you made, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And if you'd made a choice to come in and people grabbed you physically and threw you out, that would be a choice they made, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And so we go choice by choice. So Let me present this to the group. Does this create any thoughts for you or any feedback or questions?